Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Debate podcast by Android Authority, discussing topics in Android every single week. I am, of course, your host for the FDP, Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? And I am joined this week by Joe Hindi, Jonathan Feist, and Andrew Grush had to step out for this particular episode, so we brought back Lanh Wen so we could talk about the age-old debate of specs versus experience. Now, I thought this was a very interesting topic, and thank you, Andrew Grush, for creating it for this week. And we recorded it on Friday, which is why I had to bring you this episode a little bit later again. I'm sorry about that. But we were busy this week with a lot of great content. One in particular, the Samsung Galaxy S6 review, the device that actually comes up in our debate this week as an example of what could be a loss of specs, but an upgrade in experience. We talk about that and also the HTC program that was announced earlier this week, the program, as another possible way that companies could create an even better experience for users. And then we talk about what we will want out of our phones if we were thinking about the idea between specs and experience. But before I get into the episode, as usual, I want to get some housekeeping done. Thank you very much for listening to us all over the different podcast networks. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and Pocket Cast. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, remember that you can head over to any of your favorite podcast apps, and those are the best ways of listening to the FDP. If you want to follow all of us on social media, if you're watching the YouTube version of this podcast, there's a little card on the side that will bring you straight to our podcast page, and you can find all of the links there. For the rest of you, make sure you head on over to androidauthority.com and see the post for the Friday Debate podcast. But even then, remember to head on over to Android Authority for all of the best coverage everywhere, and you can find us on our YouTube channel, in the forums, and on our website at androidauthority.com. After all of that, this nice little canned intro for you guys, I do want to jump into this episode number 9 of the AAFDP. And don't forget to tweet us out or give us a shout out using the hashtag FDP, as some of you already have, so you can let us know what you think of the podcast and give us your thoughts on the topic. Without any further ado, here is episode 9, Specs versus Experience of the Friday Debate Podcast.
And that's how Lanh saved Christmas. Sorry.
Thanks, Santa. Yeah.
By shaving a Christmas tree into the side of his head. All right.
Man,
So
you should totally make that a thing, Lanh. You should start shaving seasonally appropriate shapes into your hair. That way people can tell what time of year you made the videos.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I forget, like, maybe I'm wrong here, but wasn't the first thing... Well, actually, you were with Darcy already at MWC before I even showed up with you guys. Did Darcy ask for the MWC in your hair, like, right away? Was he expecting it?
No, he didn't say anything. At least I don't remember him saying anything, but I don't know. I didn't want that. I don't want to make that like a routine thing. That's just too much work.
And then he has, like, I.O. and
Yeah.
IFA and... My favorite one would probably be like, oh, that'd be great if you get like the PAX logo.
Yeah.
That would be really good. So I am a little bit tired. I'm not going to lie. After all, earlier this morning, we released the Galaxy S6 review. And I was met with a lot of tweets and a lot of messages directly after for what was the longest review I had ever done.
And one of the best. Good job.
Well, thank you for that. I take it all of you guys have been able to check it out?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I watched it this morning. It was really. It didn't feel like a 17-minute video, and it now it totally sounds like we're kind of. What was the phrase? Where we're kind of promoting ourselves in the podcast, but no, it really didn't feel like a 17-minute video.
No,
Like,
it was well paced.
Yeah, it got to the end, and I was like, man, I cannot believe I'm 6 minutes away from watching an episode of Dragon Ball Z here. Like,
17 minutes. That's the Daily Show without commercials. That's
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting going into what topic we do have for today, because the S6, I think, it falls squarely in this topic about this whole idea of user experience versus just specs. And it's an interesting topic because I feel like they go hand in hand, which is funny because the argument is always for one or the other. So, before we even got into that, I just wanted to do like a quick check-in with everybody, as we usually do. I mean, we keep it loose here on the Friday Debate podcast, just give everyone a little glimpse into what we do for our daily lives sometimes, and obviously it's been a long week, at least for me. I'm ready to disconnect from the world right after this podcast, to be honest. And then I have to come back and edit the podcast, but that's okay. So how's everybody been doing this past week?
Oh, man. All right, so Jace is on vacation this week, so I've been kind of covering all of his stuff. And let me tell you guys, Jace has an interesting job because I've just been all over the place, like answering questions, like various questions about updates and talking about all the various things. Like he has a lot of stuff he has to cover. I kind of have a new respect for him, especially since he deals with more sponsors than I do. Mm-hmm. But holy cow, he got a lot of work. I now know why he does like 2 or 3 shows a week, and that's it. Because like I've done all 2 or 3 of those shows this week on top of my normal stuff, and I'm like Josh right now. I'm beat. I'm dead tired.
Yeah.
But I am working on something that's making me really happy. I'm revamping my entire best Android games list, and there's going to be over 60 titles on it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, dude.
There's a lot of great games out there. That's awesome.
Let me tell you, best job ever testing 60 of the best games ever.
Give us like some of the highlights. You don't have to give us like top 5 because that'll ruin the video. But like, what are a few of the ones that are in that list?
I'm just gonna scroll down and just list some stuff here. All right. So one I added in was Balloons TD. I know you guys have heard of that one. It's a tower defense game where you blow up balloons. Every time I do any kind of best games list or best tower defense games or whatever, people yell at me because I did not put Balloons TD5 on it. And so I finally downloaded it and played it, and it's actually really good. It's a little childish, but still really good. Like, it's really great for kids, and it's simple graphics, casual gamer kind of stuff. But I was really impressed by how good it was. And then I have some stuff that was on the last list, like Clash of Clans and CSR Racing.
So is Clash of Clans really that good? Because I've never touched it, and I see it on TV more than I care for.
There is a lot of content. I've been playing the game off and on for like 2 years now, and I'm still not at the end.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think I've been playing it for almost a year now. It gets updated like real frequently, so there's always like it's hard to ever like reach the end because they're always constantly adding new things. So
yeah, and like right when you start getting sick of where you are now, they go ahead and add something new. Like you've always been able to get into clans and like donate troops and stuff like that. And I got sick of the game and I put it down, and then like a week later they're like, now we have clan wars where clans can go head to head. And I got right back into the game. And then like I started getting tired of the game again a little bit. And they're like, now there's a new troop that flies and draws damage. And I was like, flying tank, I have to try it. So, and then I made the mistake of getting all of my friends into it. So now, I get to play with them all the time.
See, but what I like about it is that like they actually like give you what you want. Like they will add little things to the game that were missing before, and things like the ability to opt out of clans and stuff or whatever it was that they recently added. And that's just something that like was kind of missing for a while.
So is that like the opposite of Destiny? Or so what did they actually give the fans what they want, I suppose?
Yeah. And then another thing they added along with that was clan levels, where your clan gains levels, and based on its level you get like little perks, like you can ask for troops more often, and you can discard troops, and you get more storage space. And it's they do, like Lanh said, they do a whole lot of stuff pretty much all the time. Yeah. I also have Out There on this list, and that was something that Taylor Martin actually reviewed before he was at Android Authority. And I watched his review, and I loved the game ever since, so I put it on there.
Oh, good.
I'm trying to think of one that's like a surprise, where like I'd say it and everyone was like, "What? That's gonna make the list?" But
I was actually going to say, I was actually going to say, like, where do you stand as the app reviewer, the game reviewer, on games that have been adapted from other systems, like a PC game, like Star Wars KOTOR, for example?
That's on the list.
It's on the list. Sweet.
That and Grand Theft Auto and XCOM Enemy. Is it Enemy Unknown or is it Enemy? It's Enemy Within. XCOM really messed with me because I went out and went through all the trouble of doing this big, huge review for XCOM Enemy Unknown, and then they trashed it and came out with Enemy Within, which is exactly the same game with a little more content. like, you guys couldn't have just done an update?
Well, the reason why I love the adapted games, especially the ones from PC, like right now I'm playing Shadowrun, Dragonfall, the director's cut. And
I love that game.
Yeah, I just got into it. It's really great. The learning curve is kind of steep, but once you get into it, it's actually really fun. And I love that they keep it tabletop in the sense that if you put in, like, I'm at that part, I'm still early in the game where you get these DVDs and you have to watch them, and it basically gives you the story that's going to lead the rest of the game on. Instead of actually showing you a video of what's on the DVD, it's actually a big block of text describing what you're watching, which is so tabletop. It made me laugh because I was like, yeah, this is definitely tabletop roots. The reason why I like those games far better than all the other ones is you don't have to pay for basically progression, because like even with Skyforce, I paid for the power-ups, and I paid a couple times for the 5,000 stars in order to buy new stuff, and I don't want to have to pay for something for progression in a game, and I feel like the adapted ones don't do that.
Yeah, that's something I was really aiming for with this list, because I had a list before. It was about 35 games, but I included a lot of popular games also along with that. Like, I had Candy Crush on the last one, and it's one of those things like where most people hate that game, but like a billion people love that game. So it's one of those, like, well, it's good because it's popular, and a lot of people don't like that mindset. But I mean, it's true. If you can get 500 million people to download your game, and 88% of them like it, it's a good game.
Yeah.
It sucks to say it, but it's a good game.
Did you just say Flappy Birds? Is that what you said?
Nope. I did not say Crappy Birds.
Okay. Just checking.
Goodness gracious, that game was bad.
You remember when
that
all
will
of
not
the,
be adorning the list.
Remember when all of the variants of that came out? Like, I remember when Android Wear was first a thing. Someone made like the floppy droid or something for Android Wear. I had that installed in my watch for a little while. It was kind of, I don't know. It's a good time waster for when we were in line and someone looked at me like, "What the hell are you doing to your watch?" It's just like tap, 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 tap. But yeah, that's good. Really looking forward to that list, Joe. Let's move over to Feisty. Feisty, what have you been up to this past week since our last episode, which finally is in our in-house, rather than the live ones from the show?
Certainly. This last week kind of boiled down to it. Of course, there was tab times and everything that pertains to, but in my Android customization series, I took on a project that I thought would be fairly simple, but it kind of consumed most of my week. What I did was a hands-on tutorial how to do a factory reset on your device. Now, of course, the actual factory reset is just a couple buttons, but going through all of the steps, the things that you should do before you do that, backing up your apps, how to back them up, all that sort of stuff, it turned into quite the adventure.
Yeah, backing up apps is not an easy thing to do. Like, forgive me, I didn't get to read the article yet, but what were your solutions for backing up apps? What? It's funny, you use an app to back up your apps, but what did you use for that?
Actually, I broke it down for the users. I gave them 3 basic options. First of all, obviously, just the apps. So Helium backup for non-rooted users, and Titanium for Titanium backup, Titanium root folder, whatever it's called. I forget the name already. That's terrible, but so apps, of course. From there, I also suggested just installing a file explorer and just manually going through and just copy and paste those files out. Of course, from there, I got to reference a USB OTG connector, and just if you don't have a micro USB port, micro SD card slot is what I meant to say. Just OTG, hook up a flash drive and copy your files off, and then copy them back on.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, put everything up to the cloud. Same sort of thing, of course, but...
Well, didn't Helium do that? Doesn't it have an option to put everything in like a Dropbox or something? Or
it does, yeah, Dropbox or your Google Drive, but you have to pay for the premium version for that, and I try and keep it free on our Android customization series. Other than Tasker, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, backing up everything and trying to keep everything safe. I've had to do that multiple times for like my parents' S5s, and it's mostly because of their pictures, because they went on a a couple trips this past year, so they filled up their memory so quickly. And eventually I just broke down and I got my mom like a 64 gigabyte micro SD card. I was like, just use this. And
Yeah, exactly.
and it's not even like a fifth filled, and they went to like freaking Budapest like a couple months ago. So much in there. All right, cool. Well, our I'm trying to think of the term. I almost said non-regular, but I mean, obviously Andrew Grush is not with us right now, though he did come up with the topic for this week. But in replace of Andrew Grush,
I'm a fill-in.
He's a fill-in. I was trying to think of like our non-regular. That's what I was going to say, but it doesn't sound right. It sounds like you need some Metamucil or something.
Substitute teacher.
Our temp. Lanh, how's it been this past week? I saw you came out with a couple of key reviews this past week.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I was as busy as you guys, but I had the Xiaomi review last week and then the Moto E this week, but other than that, like I haven't really had too much going on. So
well, tell us about that Moto E, because I saw the video. It's a great video, and I thought it was a good way of encapsulating what this budget phone was able to bring. It's about time they put LTE on that thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
but yeah. Well, go ahead.
I actually really like this phone. I think obviously it's not like, a super powerhouse of a phone, and it does get slow every once in a while, but for what it is, like, $150 LTE, like I think the LTE like makes the difference. Like I think, because that was kind of like the drawback for me, like for the last year's model. So I think the LTE really makes a huge difference on this one. And I don't know, I like it. It's like a nice little phone that you can just like grip in your hand easily and use in one hand. I don't know, like that's what I love most about it. It's kind of refreshing to just be able to hold it in one hand and just reach every corner of the screen. And it's, it's pretty good for most things, but obviously if you're trying to like multitask like crazy, it's going to like get a little bit choppy, but
yeah, I
don't know. It's nice for what it is. So I think Moto did a good job.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great jumping off point for what we're going to talk about this week. Basically, we are going to get into this this oddly named warranty program that HTC unveiled this past week called but it was sort of the jumping off point for what we're basically going to be talking about here, which is the debate between what's more important, the user experience or the specs, the features. What is really required for a phone to sort of be successful, I suppose, at least in our eyes. Jumping off the Moto E, Lanh, so here's my question to you. You have the Moto E that obviously doesn't have what many would probably say raw power, but its experience is still adequate enough. What's important to you in the Moto E? Is it the fact that it is a very accessible package, and does it really sort of is it a bummer for you that it doesn't have those specifications?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bummer, because I mean, you have to sort of put the whole package into perspective. And I mean, when you look at what you're paying, you're paying $150 for it. So you're kind of just, you have to really think about, the price. And I think it delivers pretty well for what it is. It's not a powerhouse, but it does perform well. And like the overall experience is good. So I think that's really the only thing you can really expect from it for the price. And the LTE totally makes it worth it, I think, because that makes a huge difference in the overall experience. Because like, you don't want to have a phone that has 3G and then you have to deal with slow load times on top of, some random choppiness here and there. So the LTE just makes a huge difference, I think, in the user experience.
So I mean, we just got back from MWC where Lanh was there at CES, so he got, you got the chance to deal with some pretty high-end devices like the G Flex 2, and just this past month you had the S6 Edge, and Lanh will be the one to do the review of the S6 Edge when the time comes. So given that, especially for the two of us, we've been able to use so many different phones across so many different companies and user experiences and different design languages. So what is more important to you then in a general user experience? Not talking about just the Moto E or anything after that, but just in general, if you're going to buy a phone, put your hard-earned money down on something, and let's say, well, I was about to say price is no object, but I don't think that should be a factor here. But what is important to you? Is it raw power specifications, or is it features, or is it design? Because some people are harping on that recently.
For me, it's like it's kind of a combination of things, but at the end of the day, like I want a good user experience. I'll take a good user experience over, the greatest specs out there. And I'm not saying that I don't want the greatest specs. Like, I'll take it if I can get it, but like I prefer like a user experience that works. And that's why I'm such a big fan of like the Moto X. Like, it's not like a powerhouse of a phone. It didn't come out with the latest specs when it came out, but the user experience is great. And you get like, Motorola really nails it with, all of their features are not gimmicky. They actually work, like Moto Display and Moto Action, all that stuff. It all works really well. And then, it's running basically what is a pure version of Android. So, I love pure Android basically. So that's why I love the Moto X so much. And it has to me, it has a good looking design. I love the design of the Moto X, and it's premium, but it's not the best spec'd phone, but I think it delivers a good overall experience, and that's what I love about that phone so much.
Okay, Feisty, how do you feel on that subject? Are you a specs person, or are you a features / experience? Well, see, this is the weirdest question to kind of put into one side or the other. There's so many different angles to this, so I'll just put it this way: what is most important to you when it comes to a phone?
And my answer is as complicated as the question. Just like you said in the beginning here, Josh, one is kind of the other. So when I look at the hardware of the device, design is very important to me, not so much for looks, but for how it handles. You get the flat back devices. Sometimes they don't fit in the hand very well, but you got these Motorola devices, and actually I like the HTCs as well, where they have that curved back and they feel really nice. And more importantly, they stick in your hand. I've yet to find, I should say, an LG device that I haven't dropped on the floor. It just slides right out. It doesn't fit right, just the slippery backing. So in those regards, it's important to me that the design provides the function. But for me, the big thing really is I live in a multi-device world. So for most of my devices, I'm not looking for high-end specs. I keep referencing these two little devices, the LG Realm and the HTC Desire 510. They're very low-end devices, but that's why I bought them. For the most part, they've both turned into MP3 players just for different positions in my world. And so for those, I do not need high-end specs. And the same thing goes. My daily driver has been the first-gen Moto G, and it's been that way for over a year now. I am looking to upgrade, but again, the distribution of all my devices. So I'm okay with the Moto G, being in my pocket, relatively low end. It's powerful enough. Basically, if I had to sum it up, it's powerful enough to supply wireless hotspot, so that my tablets, which, I've got an HTC, the Nexus 9 sitting on my lap right now. That's my high-end device. It's made for productivity. It's made for the, entertainment stuff. My phone, I can live with a low-end phone because I have a high-end tablet that handles all the...
Feisty with his glass of cognac and all of his money to have all. I want it all.
Well, I don't know how to put this. Yes, it does take some money to have multiple devices, but then again, does it? The HTC 9 was $400. I got the Moto G at the most expensive $200. That's still a couple hundred less than buying a Galaxy S6 straight out.
Yeah, that's fair. So, it is true that if you are able to have the same have certain experiences across multiple different devices, then I guess you would be able to sort of skirt the issue, and perhaps that's what's going on there. And to be fair to Feisty, some of the phones that he said he's had for years now, so it's not like he dropped all that money at once. So here's where I think I was wondering what Joe was going to say here, because you are an app guy, and you've got you need to have a powerful device. I'm assuming, I don't like assuming, but this is where I'm coming from here, You need to have a powerful device to be able to run all of these games, all of these applications, sometimes at the same time, and you have all these app lists, so the phone needs to be able to hold all of those applications, supposedly if you're going to be using one phone for literally all of them. So where do you stand on this particular question? We're going to hash this out a little bit later, but where do you stand on specs versus experience? Let's put it that way.
Well, I think like three out of pretty much everyone said it so far, but one kind of begets the other, doesn't it? I mean, when Lanh was talking about the Moto E earlier, he was talking about how it slowed down sometimes. It was a good phone, for what it was, for the price point, but it slowed down sometimes. Struggled a little bit here and there, and it's one of those things where, if you did a direct spec by spec comparison with a flagship phone, not thinking about cost whatsoever, the Moto E is clearly an inferior device that offers an inferior, user experience in comparison to, say, a Motorola X 2014 edition. The same manufacturer, pretty much the same software, but the specs matter very greatly in both price and experience. So that's, I lean towards specs because, in virtually every instance, specs almost guarantees at least a more smooth user experience, even if the user experience itself is not optimal. Like, I've been using TouchWiz for 2 years now. I've had my Note 3 for 2 years. I am not a huge fan of TouchWiz, but the Snapdragon 800, the 3 gigs of RAM, the 32 gigabytes of storage, that's the hardware package that at the time I really wanted. And I've been able to kind of disregard the things I dislike about TouchWiz in order to have that kind of device that has that kind of power to, as you say, the one phone that I use to review all of the apps that I do. And that's why I got the NVIDIA Shield tablet over, say, the Nexus 9, because, it's the quad core over the dual core. They're both pretty much stock Android, so it's not like that matters at all. But, it's just, I like having a lot of power because I know that its software can be fixed. Hardware cannot. So, I tend to lean towards something that's going to make me happy hardware-wise, and then either hope that, the software gets better or root my device and install a ROM with software that I prefer.
Okay. I mean, I love that you brought up the spec idea, where you stand on leaning towards specifications just a little bit, because I think my tastes have really evolved over the past year or so, because while I would love to say that, all I need is a Moto G, that's all I need, it gives me the ability to use the apps that I want and blah, blah, blah. I don't play Dead Trigger on the highest level of graphics, quote unquote, I don't do stuff like that. But now that we're coming into this new crop of flagship devices, we have HTC here, and I'm holding my M9 that's being reviewed currently. I'm holding my M9 right now, and it's got a great design on it, and it's it may not have changed a lot from before, but it kind of refined it. It's not as slippery as the M8, which kind of would have made sense to me last year if they came out with this campaign. I hate saying that, but if it came out with this little warranty program where basically, if you drop your phone, and I mean that, if you drop it, it says free one-time phone replacement within 12 months of your purchase of the phone for carrier switching or damage. And now that's a pretty interesting idea, is the fact that, I could drop this phone, well, not this one, I didn't buy this one, but I could drop the phone I buy from HTC, crack the screen, go to a store and say, hey, new one, please. And basically they would say, okay, no questions asked. That's essentially the ideal part of this. So, which kind of brings me to this other question that I had, where user experience doesn't necessarily mean just software. It doesn't mean the congruency of the hardware with the software, with the specifications, but there's also those perks that you get with a phone. And HTC started it last year with the I'm blanking on the name, but they had a warranty programs. Advantage. HTC Advantage. They had that last year with it, and now they have this even better version, I suppose you could say, with this which they really need to change that name. Do perks like this have any what's the term I'm looking for? Does it help at all in terms of how you feel about a phone?
Before anybody answers this, can I just get it out of the way that we're assuming that this new warranty program is not related to the HTC CEO stepping down?
Well, I was wondering if we were going to bring that up because, yeah, the CEO stepped down, and then Cher Wang, who, I was at HTC Frequencies, and she came by and spoke to all of us press in that room. She, I have to say, and I'm just putting this out there for the record, it's great that she is now the CEO. We have more women in higher positions across the board, and HTC is going to be one of those shining beacons for stuff like that. And she's an incredibly smart woman, graduated from Berkeley, and she's I think she'll do fine there. But my question to you, Feisty, since you brought it up, why would they coincide?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. First of all, Mr. CEO steps up and says, you know what, let's give everybody a free phone, so to speak, and then the board steps in and says, nah, you're fired. The flip side, he knew he was leaving.
Messed up, I'm sorry.
The flip side, of course, is, he's disgruntled. He knows he's leaving, so he's like, you know what, I'm going to give everybody a free phone. Now, we're going to laugh both of these off, but... you always have to wonder if something like that is legitimately at play, or if this is, obviously it's going to be how it is moving forward, and I hope that that is HTC's policy, but that's why I brought that up, just, almost for the laugh.
Yeah, almost. And you're right. It does sound laughable, both of those situations, really. But, oh man, I hadn't thought about it that way. I always... maybe I'm naive, but whenever something happens in a company, I just see it for what it is. Oh, you stepped down, and now Cher Wang is the CEO, rather than thinking that something very nefarious is going on, which is almost always the case, But yeah, so back to our question there, and yes, that's a very interesting point to bring up. So thanks for that, Feisty. And where was I going before? Do the perks of what a company is doing for a phone actually help in terms of its experience overall? Because maybe looking outside of the phone itself, let's think outside of the box. Do you think that people would buy, let's say, the HTC One M9 not solely, but partially because of this program?
In this case, with the HTC One M9, I think so, because you see all of the the overheating rumors that are going around, and people are legitimately worried that they're going to get this phone and the processor is going to blow up out of the back of the phone because it's overheating. And so you see something like HTC stepping in, like, look, if the phone screws up, we're going to give you another one. So you don't have to worry about it. At least you don't have to worry about at least the first one. And I think that's going to help alleviate a lot of the trepidation that goes into buying a phone that, pretty much all the way up till its launch is going to have to deal with these, overheating rumors, until you guys, until all the reviewers, all you guys get the final software and can show one way or another if it is going to overheat. I mean, like HTC One devices have been, hot forever. The One M7 was a really warm device. I assume the One M8 was. I mean, it's made out of aluminum. It's a natural heatsink. But like looking at the that one report that showed the HTC One M9 is like bright orange and everything else was like dark red, showing that it was super hot and could burn people. Having something in place, having a back door to to fix a problem like that. I mean, at least I'm gonna buy the HTC One M9 regardless of whether or not it overheats, and I like knowing that I can get that protection plan and be totally okay with it. So I think that it does. The outside peripherals do, and help with the customer experience. At least make them feel more comfortable with the potential flaws of the phone that they might be getting.
Okay, Lanh, let's say you're a klutz. Let's say you drop phones all the time. Like you go to the restroom, you do your business, and the thing falls in the toilet. Like, let's say stuff like that happens from time to time. Would something like this program make it easier for you to have that peace of mind? Is it, because let's put it this way: the HTC One M9, when you compare it to the other phones in the genre, in the flagship space, I should say, you don't get all of those specifications. You don't get, let's say, the 16 megapixel camera of the S6, which I gave a pretty rave review on in my review. We have yet to see what HTC has in store for this 20 megapixel one. Now that we have, final software coming out and stuff, you don't get a quad HD display. You do get an aluminum body, which is nice, but then the S6 does have a metal frame also. So is a program like actually enough to sort of alleviate those holes in the M9's philosophy?
I don't know if it's enough to really like sway users one way or another, but I think it is like a really good incentive for like what they're doing, because like I think at least for like the average consumer, I think this is something that they would want as far as being able to carry their phone and not have to worry if they're going to damage it. Like they're going to be stuck with it forever now that they've broken it or whatever, but now they can just replace it because of this program. And like that's one thing about Android phones is you don't have the option to just walk into like a carrier store and be like, my phone's messed up, and you get a replacement like on the spot. But this is like kind of the next best thing with what HTC is doing. So, I mean, if you break the screen or if it gets water damage or whatever, like you can just send it in and you get another one. So it's like, it's no questions asked, which is, to me, it's like, it doesn't appeal to me personally because I'm not like a klutz. Like I'm pretty careful with my phones and stuff. But I mean, if I wasn't that type of person, then like this would be like, I think it would definitely sway me into getting the device. And I hate to like, pull like a company like Apple into the conversation, but like all my friends that like own iPhones, like when their phones get messed up, they just walk into the Apple store and they just get another one, no questions asked. And this like type of incentive, like it's pretty close to that pretty much, because you don't really have that same advantage with Android phones in general. So
about that.
I think they're doing
The fact that all the iPhone users I know have had replaced their iPhones like so many times.
Yeah, they just walk into the Apple store and like they just get another one. Like I've even had friends that like faked that their phone was messed up just so they get a different one because they had a ding on it or something. So this is like kind of the next best thing, and I don't think there's any other company that's doing anything like it. So, and it's kind of hard to do it with Android phones because there's so many of them.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there might be a little bit of incentive coming from HTC with this program, whether or not, because one of the first things you have to do is, and this has always been HTC's problem, this is no secret to anybody who follows the industry, but HTC basically has this main problem of they have a great idea, they have a great product, but they just cannot market the thing like well enough so that everybody knows. I agree with you. It would be a good swaying option for people to say, I can get a really great phone, and then if I drop it in the toilet or something, I can get a replacement. I keep saying drop it in the toilet because I knew somebody who had that chronic problem. It was always dropping in the toilet for some reason. So I'm just harking back into that. But anyway, if HTC is going to offer something like that, how good is it even going to be unless people know that that's a thing? And
yeah, that's something that I was wondering too. Like, how are they going to market this thing? Because I hope like they're actually going to advertise it and not just like put like a piece of paper in the box.
That's what Advantage was,
like,
right? Wasn't that what that was?
Yeah, it's just a piece of paper in the box, but they never really said it. I don't think there was ever any advertisements for it. So I think they would have to really push this if they really want to sort of throw it out there as like sort of almost like a feature, I guess, for the phone.
Well,
I mean, didn't you see those, those Robert Downey Jr. videos? I'm pretty sure the third one where he's woken up in a firefight in a military uniform, I think that was supposed to be about the plan, because, he had the grenade as an and he plugged it into the wall socket or the light socket. Which totally embodies the experience. Totally. I'm being sarcastic, guys, if you couldn't figure it out.
I was gonna say, you made sense of any of those videos. I am impressed.
We've been talking about HTC marketing for like, going on 5 minutes, and no one has brought up the Robert Downey Jr. videos yet, so I felt like I had to.
Well, for sure. We at Frequencies, we got a glimpse at, did they show, because I didn't see the entire presentation. It was at South by Southwest, right? Or am I wrong? Well,
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to remember where they posted them. I knew that at South by Southwest, I think HTC was inviting people to come by and they were going to show off all of the videos that he did. Did you guys see that one with the bunny?
No, I've only seen the first three.
The first three. Oh.
I've I've not seen a single one.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they showed that one because I had seen that one. So if they didn't show it, I can't talk about it. So there you go.
Yes, they did show it. I caught a clip of all 10 of them, assuming that's all there is. But the 10 of them, yeah, the bunny shows up at least twice.
Oh, okay, there you go. So I was just curious if you guys saw. Like that was probably the oddest one of the bunch in my opinion. This is what I was saying.
Yeah.
But in any case, this will be a nice way for me to transition into. Actually, I do want to bring up the S6. I mean, obviously, I just got done with the review. But Lord knows, I'm through talking about it for hours on end. 17 minutes to be exact inside my video. But so we're gonna look at a different perspective when it comes to user experience. So HTC is putting out this warranty program, and maybe you're not getting all of the specifications that, let's say, the S6 has, Quad HD display, the metal on there, but I'm gonna circle back a little bit to where Joe and I were basically on the same page, where we were saying that specifications really do drive the experience, and if you are going to be the spec whore, let's say, then it could pretty much mean that you're going to get a great experience on the phone because they should go hand in hand. But that hasn't been the case for the past couple years, especially when it comes to phones like, let's say, Samsung Galaxy S5, S4. You get the best processor in there, but then it's still a stuttery experience, dropped frames everywhere, and it gets slower over time. But speaking as the person who has been using the new flagship so far, we're finally past that point for this year. The great specifications are coming up, and the S6 is a great example of how, I mean, they are using the Exynos from their in-house processing team, but man, this thing flies. I've had no slowdowns whatsoever. Now, we finally did get a great software experience, a great user experience in the S6, but it's without a couple of key features like the replaceable battery, the expandable storage. Where do you guys stand on this never-ending debate of whether or not Samsung brought everything that they could? Do you think that the replaceable battery is important, or do you think that the expandable storage is more important, considering that the phone has a great freaking experience underneath?
I don't have a whole lot to say about Samsung because I haven't used the S6 yet, but I thought about the expandable storage being a big deal that they got rid of it, but then they turned around and gave us, what was it, like 32, 64, and 128 gigabyte options.
Yeah.
So I think that the problem that caused the rise of expandable storage to begin with is kind of not there with the Samsung Galaxy S6. Because back then, back in the day, you used to have 4, 8 gigabytes, sometimes less than that, of internal storage. And if you wanted anything on your phone, you had to have, expandable storage. And I remember when I got I had a Nexus 4 for app testing for a long time, and it was an 8 gigabyte model, and I hated it. I hated the fact that I owned a telephone in this day and age, or a smartphone in this day and age, that only had 8 gigabytes of storage, and there was no way for me to expand that. But, if you're walking into the store and, you have 50 gigs of music and you buy a 128 gigabyte Samsung Galaxy S6, you're not even hitting half of your storage. You still have half of your storage left. So I think that, the people that, still want the SD card space on top of the 128 gigs of storage, those people, they're not a lot of them. People who actually need, 180, 190, 256 gigabytes of storage on a smartphone, those people are extremely few and extremely far between.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with you, but 128 gigabytes, Apple kind of proved it here. You're not going to get everything without paying everything. And Samsung is going to have that model now. The 128 gigabyte version is probably going to be through the roof in terms of what its price is going to be.
Well, 2 words there, bud: carrier subsidies. That solves all problems. It's going to be $299 on Verizon and T-Mobile, and I know I don't know how carrier subsidies work, overseas. So I'm sorry to our European, Asian, and African listeners, because I don't know how your paradigms work over there. But at least here in North America, we're going to be able to get this phone for $300 or less, I assume. Anyway, it seems like they're going to be able to do something like that. So, when you look at it that way, if I can walk into a store and spend $300 on the, the LG G4 Note or whatever the hell they're doing this year, or walk away with a Galaxy S6 with what amounts to my laptop's SSD's worth of storage for $300, and they're both the same price, like I'm gonna go with the 128 gigs. Like it went from being a deficiency to being almost a feature, because I mean, how many other phones out there that offer that much space, even with expandable storage? Because 128 gigabyte micro SD cards, they aren't popular yet, and they're still really expensive. So assuming you get a 64 gig card and pop it into a 32 gigabyte phone, you still have less than 100.
Yeah.
So even with the 128 gigs, you don't have to buy the 64 gig card, and you still have more than pretty much everybody who's not willing to spend $100 on a 128 gigabyte card. You're gonna have more than everybody still, even without the expandable storage. So battery is an entirely different thing altogether. But in terms of expandable storage, I think the point is almost totally moot. Like, I don't think it matters, because they do have that option for people who need that much storage.
Okay, so cold hard numbers for Joe Indy.
That's how I roll, yo.
You still don't have 128. You don't even have 100. But it's very true. If you have a 32 gigabyte with a 64 gigabyte card in there. But I guess where I was coming from with it is, if yes to the people who are the superpower users who install every single game in the Play Store and have absolutely no space on their phones. I mean, I've had a 64 gigabyte OnePlus One. And it was a pretty sublime experience. I could download every single podcast there ever was and still be okay. But for the S6, if I'm using it just for on the daily for the very things that I need, I don't even use half of that storage. And it doesn't really matter to me that there are those holes in the specifications, like the battery and the SD card, because the experience as a whole is amazing. And technically, it's half because of the specifications, because of how good that processor is, on top of a good experience on the software. Lanh, you use technically both phones, but you focused on the Edge back at MWC. Was it not already a greater experience in TouchWiz than it has ever been to you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it was so much. It felt. I mean, obviously, I only played with it, for a short amount of time, but it felt so much faster, and it was such a lighter experience. I mean, you could see right off the bat that it was cleaner, it was lighter, and it just, all the animations seemed just half a step quicker than before. Yeah. So it was just a much better experience.
It just truly feels like, and let me preface this by saying the M9, the same way. It screams. It absolutely screams. It flies through everything. We have a user experience versus specifications. To me, in the flagship space, of course, they're going to be one and the same, which is why I thought that this debate question was so interesting, because I felt like we were going to end up in this space. It's when you factor in the mid-range devices that things get a little bit more convoluted, and I think that's also expected from us. But so for you, Lanh, do you use micro SD cards or any of those extra features in all of your phones? I mean, we could even talk about the Edge. Are you going to use the Edge if you get that phone?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I'll find out once I actually get it. But I mean, the thing about the Edge that I'm so enamored with is just the swiping experience. I just like swiping along those edges. It just feels a lot nicer, especially with all the elements that come out from the sides, like from all the apps and stuff. It just seems to kind of make sense more with those edges. So, but as far as the features, like the People Edge, and Night Clock, I mean, I'll have to find out once I actually get it and use it as a daily. But as far as I'm removable batteries and micro SD cards and stuff, I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority, but I'm not a fan of moving parts. So for me, the less moving parts, the better. So I've never really been a fan of micro SD cards and removable batteries. Even when I had phones that had those features, like the Galaxy S1, the Galaxy S2, I never really took advantage of them. I never bought spare batteries just so I could have spare batteries and just swap it out on the go. I didn't feel I'm that much of a nerd to have to do that, to have to carry spare batteries in my pocket. And nowadays, power packs are a dime a dozen. So why don't you just carry a power pack? The only advantage that I really see from having a removable battery now is that you can swap it out if it goes bad. But I don't really see anything else that you're gaining from that. So I don't know. I don't understand the argument behind it. But again, I guess I'm in the minority. And then I don't know, micro SD cards. I just never used them. I don't know. I prefer just internal storage. And like I remember like that big hoopla that like everybody made a big deal about when Google like got rid of micro SD cards like on the Nexus 4 and beyond. And like I was all for that change because basically what they said was that it created a more confusing user experience, because when you plugged your phone in, you would have two windows that popped up. And if you're like tech savvy, you understand those windows, obviously. But if you're not, like, you're going to be confused as to which one's your internal and which one's your external. So I was all for that change. Like, I was totally fine with it. But so again, for me, less moving parts, the better. I just prefer to not have that. I feel like Samsung sort of, they sort of alleviated that by offering 32, 64, and 128. So I don't know. I don't think there's much room to really complain here, because at least they did something instead of still offer you 16 and 32 and that's it. At least they still did something. They took some sort of action.
Well, that feels like the evolution that we needed, right? Because even 16 a year ago was starting to feel a little bit slim. And for whatever reason, all of the companies were too stubborn to realize that for the general user. But yeah, we're coming up on our last, let's say, 15 minutes or so. I want to make sure we hear from Feisty on this particular one. Using the S6 as a scope, we have those two main features. Now, Samsung has finally doubled back on what they used to do with all of their phones in the past, focused on the user experience in the S6, but we're losing two key specs and features. Using that as a scope, but you can always go off the rail a little bit if you want to elaborate, Feisty. How do you feel about the replaceable battery feature and the expandable storage feature?
Let me say, no, you guys are all wrong. You need these things.
You're wrong, my jerk.
Well, you're... And finally, we have a debate. Yes.
I know. We've been getting that a lot in our YouTube version of it. So it's not really a debate, guys. It's like, well, hey, Friday debate topic, okay?
All right, so I'm going to give you my personal opinion and experiences, and then I'm going to play that devil's advocate here and stand up for the people who want the cards and exchangeable batteries. So personal opinion, I'm also not using any of the micro SD card slots or external batteries for any of the devices that support them. Sorry, I do have external or micro SD cards in some of those devices, but there is absolutely no substitute for internal storage. I don't care how much, for example, music you can install on an SD card and plug in. If you can't install the app to run the music, you're toast. Doesn't matter. So no substitute for internal storage. Same thing with batteries. Like Lanh said, power packs are cheap. So are USB cables. I've got them everywhere. It doesn't matter where I go in my world. House, car, backpack. There is a power supply and there's a USB cable. I can plug in, keep my devices 100% all day long. Who cares about the battery life? Now, playing that devil's advocate, the micro SD card. Joe, you brought up a great point in that, we're going to be able to buy the S6, for example, for $300 or less subsidized. But how much would it be if you got the lower end one and purchased your own micro SD card? My question, not so much question, but point is, internal storage seems to be triple the price of micro SDs right now.
Yeah.
So to be able to get a 32 gig device and plug in a 128 gig SD card would still be $100, $200, whatever the price is, less expensive than just straight up buying the 128 gig device in the first place.
Well, you got to remember, bud, that the internal storage on a device is it's a different storage system. An SD card is it's just your standard little flash storage chip. But the stuff that goes into Android, especially the Galaxy S series, they have the whole new storage thing that they're doing this year that's supposed to increase reliability and increase stability, increase performance, and all that jazz. Of course, we won't know until the future if any of those things are true. But it's not like they just took a 128 gigabyte SanDisk SD card and soldered it onto the motherboard. This is it's a different system entirely. And at least in my experience, I've had I've had several micro SD cards fail on me, just outright fail, where, I've never had the internal storage go bad. And, I've, rocked my internal storage the last 3 years since I started working at Android Authority. I've downloaded 60 games in the last, 10 days. And, my internal storage is still going strong, but the last 64 gigabyte card I bought is in the trash. So, I think it's not just, you're paying for, it's, cheaper storage. You're also getting something that, at least as far as I know, I don't have any stats to back this up. You're getting something that's more reliable and something that works better with, the other internals of the system. And if Samsung's claims are correct, something that's actually faster and more reliable.
I agree with you personally, but Devil's Advocate says, why are you abusing your internal storage with things like MP3 files and JPEGs when those could just be, they do not need the high speed. Just dump them off on the micro SD card, distribute that performance and the wear and tear on your storage.
Yeah, that's a good angle, because like I mentioned much earlier in the podcast, I had to give my mother a 64 gigabyte card just for all the pictures that she was taking. There's nothing else on that thing. She wouldn't even know how to put anything else on there. It's just the pictures. So that's an interesting angle.
Well, I mean, again, it comes from the standpoint of reliability. Like me personally, I've had every 64 gigabyte micro SD card I've ever owned has died. I currently have a 32 gigabyte in my Note 3 right now because my 64 gigabyte died, and on the face of it, you're right. Assuming 0% chance of failure, you win. I can't argue that. However, given the fact that, micro SD cards generally, at least anecdotally, in my experience, fail a whole lot more often than internal. I mean, I've never had an internal storage go bad on me once. Never. And I have owned well over a dozen Android devices for going on 5 years now. But I have had about half of the micro SD cards that I've bought eventually die on me. So, I put all my MP3s on there, I put all the wear and tear on the SD card, and then the SD card dies, I have to go buy another one, I have to sync everything all over again. Hopefully I backed up my pictures somewhere, damn, and, rebuild the experience that I was, hoping to avoid by not using the internal storage, which probably would have lived through the experience anyway,
Agreed. Okay, and final point on micro SD cards. Again, this last week did the factory reset. What it was actually was my wife's Nexus 7. And, halfway through the process of backing up all her files and transferring her pictures onto a laptop so they were stored for later, she was like, "Can't we just pull out the card?" So here she is. She's not with us. She's not one of us, our level of users here. She just, where's the simple answer? And to be honest, I think a micro SD card is a simple answer. Again, for the MP3 files, the JPEGs, exactly what Josh was saying with his mother and the Samsung phone there. Just, the simplicity of it for those external files is, I think not having it on the new Galaxy S6 is, it is a loss. Do I care personally? No, but it is a loss. I can see where people would be angry.
I can't even argue that point. That's right, because, getting stuff off of phones onto computers is probably the most difficult, common user experience that Android has to offer. And being able to pop out the card and put it in the old, SD card reader and slipping it into the computer is way easier than, finding the cable, plugging it in, transferring everything, syncing everything, uploading it to the cloud, and then downloading it to the computer. No, you're absolutely right on that point.
Especially if you're doing a factory reset or frequently, be able to just pull the card, reset, put the card back in, and you're essentially done. That's magic.
Yeah, definitely.
There's certain parts of tech that we're never going to get that easy way of doing it. Like I mentioned in the last podcast, that printers are still the worst thing to troubleshoot of all time. But you're right. I was laughing in the inside so hard there because can't we just take the card out? That makes so much sense, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, it does.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, sorry. I think I interrupted you, Joe. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say on the battery, because I didn't say anything about the battery side of things. On the battery side of things, I am a root user, and I acknowledge as a root user that I am a fantastic minority when it comes to Android as a whole. But they're, when my NVIDIA Shield is messing up and I want to restart it really quick, I really miss being able to just tear off the back and pull the battery out. The pull battery reboot, method that has been it was almost a catchphrase in the root community for like 2 or 3 years with the phone. Oh, it's not working. Pull the battery. Pull the battery. Pull the battery. And now, with the non-removable batteries, it's like, all right, well, now hold power for like 30 seconds. And if that doesn't work, kind of tap it a few times and hold power for another 30 seconds, and maybe it'll restart. Try holding one of the volume rocker buttons. And I once sat here for 45 seconds because I was updating my NVIDIA Shield tablet and I forgot to wipe my cache and the thing was boot looping on me. So I sat here for almost 2 minutes just holding the power button down until the damn thing turned off. So, in terms of like troubleshooting and engaging in probably the most successful IT, advice of all time, which is turning it off and turning it back on again, by not having a removable battery, you have literally killed that. Like, who's going to want to sit around for, 90 seconds holding the power button going, why isn't this just working? So
especially if something goes wrong, like your display quits and you can't see what's happening. And you just want to make sure the device is off until you can get it to the shop or in for replacement. You can't tell if it's on or off anymore. But like you say, if you could just yank the battery, it's off.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, for sure. I remember doing that a lot with my Galaxy Nexus, which, by the way, was the only phone I ever had spare batteries for because the battery life on that thing was horrendous.
Yeah, it was.
And I hate the whole 30 seconds thing. Do these people not realize 30 seconds is a long time?
No, they don't. They really don't.
All right, great. Well, we have gone at length here about our ideas behind the debate between specifications, which could encompass a lot of things, and user experience, which in this case we focused on not only software and how you use the phone on the daily, but also some of the perks that you might get, since HTC was our jumping off point here. I want to thank all of you guys again for being on. Lanh, thank you for filling in for Andrew. And Andrew actually had a great idea that we should just have
No problem.
We should just have everybody on like one big phone call, and we're and we're gonna have the worst time trying to get that thing edited. And one day we'll do like 7 people or something like that. But in any case, I definitely want to. Joe just messaged in our chat that he was going to talk about 64-bit stuff. So, I mean, definitely you can do so.
Really
if you
quick.
Want to,
this is going to be like less than 3 minutes. I was talking earlier about how I lean more towards specs than user experience. Now that Android has, now that there's 32-bit and 64-bit devices, getting a 64-bit device right now is almost kind of future-proofing a little bit. Because, applications are going to eventually start coming out that can use that 64-bit architecture. And, if, even if, your Moto X 2014 can't use it, and your Moto E, even if the user experience is fantastic, when the 64-bit apps start coming out and people start using Android for, much larger, much more, immersive applications and games, 64-bit has a lot of possibilities. And, pretty much all but 4, 5, 6 Android devices are totally left out of that because they're under-spec'd. So it's just another really quick argument leaning on the side of specs over user experience and how specs can drive the user experience is that one day, after I get my HTC One M9 anyway, I'm going to be able to say all of your phones are going to be useless eventually. Whereas mine is going to be, it's not going to run the latest Android or anything, but I'm going to be able to run 64-bit applications for a good long time on that thing. And that's something that I'm, at least personally, I know people are like, oh, 64-bit, who cares? People said the same thing when Windows did 64-bit. Now look, who has a 32-bit Windows computer anymore? Feisty, if you have one, do you have one?
I don't have 2 of them on my desk.
Okay.
No.
So aside from Feisty and his cornucopia of unusual over there,
antiquated. I'm working on it.
But yeah, no one has 32-bit computers anymore. And just like one day, no one's going to have 32-bit Android devices anymore. And, getting in on that ground floor, eventually it's going to be a point where it's like, oh yeah, I can get this budget 32-bit phone. And people are going to go, ew, no, that's an inferior user experience just based on the antiquated specs, or however you say that word. Is it antiquated?
Yeah, antiquated.
Yeah, all right. I said smart things.
Yep.
But yeah, like when those 64-bit apps start coming out and they start adding so much more to the Android ecosystem. Yeah, it doesn't matter right now. I realize that. And it might not matter next year or the year after that. It might be 2-3 years before we start seeing really good 64-bit apps or even 64-bit apps in general. But eventually, all these 32-bit phones are going to be freaking useless because, you're going to be stuck on 32-bit apps, and while the rest of the world has graduated to much bigger and better things. So I wanted to mention that really quick, like way earlier, and then I got sidetracked, and then, yeah, so just wanted to mention that real quick.
No, you're right. And I just got a message from Grushy. He says, the 64-bit is very important, especially if you go for the Project Aura phone, because the taser is only compatible with 64-bit.
64-bit zapping.
Yeah, you don't want a 32-bit tase because that's like a tickle.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be 64. I actually had an image in my head of Feisty with his HTC Desire, and all these app developers are trying to like throw their 64-bit apps at him. He's like, "You guys are Nazis, man. You guys are."
I don't want to upgrade. I want to be 32-bit forever. Change sucks.
Well, to the point of the PC market or the computer market moving to 64-bit. I think for like a minute I was reading up on why 64-bit's better for processing and stuff like that, but really I just did it because it felt like that's where we were going. And then at some point all computers started to become that. And I feel like when it comes to the phones, all these phone companies are going to find ways of saying like, ours is a 64-bit processor, look how amazing that is. But in reality, the best thing that they could probably do is just make them 64-bit and we won't know the difference eventually.
Yep.
So that was kind of what I was thinking. But yeah, on that note, we will go ahead and sign off here at the Friday Debate podcast by Android Authority, discussing topics in Android every single week. Don't forget to follow all of us on social media. If you want to find the links in order to follow us on Twitter and on Google+, you can head over to the link for the full Friday Debate podcast post at androidauthority.com. If you're watching the YouTube version of this, you can pop over to that little button on the top right there. That'll slide out a card for you to head straight to that site. We're finally using cards on YouTube. I gotta get used to that too. But from there, you can also find us on all of the different podcast networks, iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, and whatnot. So remember to head on over there because those are some of the best places for you to listen to the FDP. But from there, I think we're good to go, and we're going to be coming up on our double-digit episode next week, episode number 10. It feels like so long, but we're only at episode number 10. But I want to give a congratulations to everybody. Thank you so much for being on the cast every single week. And I am going to go ahead and sign off with everybody. As usual, we're going to do our typical outro. Keep it tuned to Android Authority for all of the best. Head over to androidauthority.com and to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe to that channel if you haven't already, and listen to the Friday Debate podcast every single week because we are discussing topics in Android every week. After all, androidauthority.com is your source, guys, for all things
Taser.
Android.
I mean Android.
Taser. Yeah.
Taser. Grushy.